Let's talk about a key principle of personal finance that your parents should have told you, but they probably didn't know it. I know my parents didn't know it. And it's one that can actually help you be more content. It can help you maintain your health, your sanity, and your relationships. So the principle here is that you should be aiming to maximize your freedom and not to maximize the number of dollars or pounds or euros or whatever that are in your bank account. So I'm going to talk about this a little more in detail so you understand some of the nuances. But just remember that your goal in your life is not to actually have the most amount of money, but rather the most amount of freedom. And I'll come back to this idea of freedom because it's very important you understand what I mean by it. It doesn't mean you're just free of responsibility entirely. Okay, so let's talk first about this money issue and trying to maximize dollars versus trying to maximize freedom. So when you look at people who are chasing the most amount of money, you see that they have to make some sacrifices. Okay, so to make money, you have to sacrifice some time, some effort, your energy, right? Your mental energy, your physical energy. And in doing that, you are making a trade-off. Because if you are trying to make that money, you have to decide, well, in this 18 hours that I'm awake today, or maybe 20 hours because I'm going to work really hard, or 22 hours I'm going to work really hard, I have to allocate my life energy towards different projects. And for those who are trying to maximize the speed with which they accumulate the most amount of money, they're going to dedicate their time to the thing that generates the money. And for many people, this also requires them to sacrifice the time they spend on mental health and physical health, which is fine sometimes. It's certainly a choice people can and should make depending on their circumstances. But if you do it for too long, there are very high prices to pay. So a perfect example is like the banker who works 18 to 20 hours a day, who makes a ton of money, but doesn't have time to cultivate healthy relationships with a spouse or significant other, doesn't have time to see their kids if they have kids, doesn't have time to go to the gym and make sure that their body keeps working correctly. And so their relationships wither, their body withers. And then at the end of a 30, 40-year career, what do they have left? Maybe a whole lot of money, but not a whole lot of people they trust, not a whole lot of people they enjoy spending time with, and a body that feels like it's revolted. And then they're spending money on trying to fix their health, which will most likely fail unless they're willing to then put all their time and energy into working with their body and learning how to restore their body. This happens with all kinds of industries, all kinds of professions. You'll see it too with attorneys are a really common one. You see it with people who are in tech, who are trying to start businesses that are going to revolutionize and change the world. You can see mentally what's going on. You can see that their minds, if you ever have the chance to talk to people in Silicon Valley who are kind of higher up, you can see that there's something generally different about how they interact with the world. And that's not to say that it's necessarily bad. I've worked with many of these people personally and seen that they're highly competent. They generally have good intentions, but you can see that there's a price to be paid in terms of your mental acuity, your ability to focus, your ability to maintain your health, to understand your own body. And that all translates down the line into declining health. Basically, you can try to buy your way out of that for a certain amount of time, but eventually it comes down to how much time are you spending maintaining your health versus how much time you're spending trying to maximize dollars. Now, the other problem here, besides the sacrifice of health, is freedom. Okay, so this happens right from the get-go, whether you're working in a minimum wage job or you're working in a job that pays you $500,000 a year, you are choosing how to allocate your time, and you are allocating that time to get monetary reward. And depending on the arrangement with your employer, you have to bend your choices to match what the employer demands. So if you're working a minimum wage job and you're working 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, hopefully you are getting overtime, otherwise you're being screwed. You don't have the time to make choices that benefit your health, that benefit your friends, your family, yourself, right? You barely have time to cook, you barely have time to keep your house organized, you barely have time to think long term, so you're on this treadmill where you are just feeling stuck. The same thing can happen if you're making $500,000 a year and you feel like, oh, I'm working 80 hours a week, I'm making $500,000 a year, but my housing costs are $200,000 a year or more, and I spend just because my daily life sucks so much that I feel miserable and I want to treat myself to some nice things. And what you're doing is then trying to get all these dollars, you're trying to maximize this income, and you feel miserable doing it. So you're trying to paper over it by buying other stuff, buying experiences, buying things, and you're actually not free to make choices. If your employer tells you, hey, I need you in here this weekend, hey, I need you to do this thing that you don't agree with, I need you to sacrifice your personal life so that you can earn more money because I tell you so, you're not better off. Nobody's impressed by you being a well-paid slave, right? You, least of all, should be impressed by being a highly paid slave. So this is the contrast I want to draw, is when you are trying to set up your life for the long term, you want to maximize freedom to make choices that are in line with your values. So if you are an attorney who became an attorney, like many attorneys I know, became attorneys because they wanted to do good. But many attorneys end up in positions where they are working to make money because they have to pay their bills, which is fine, and they are doing it in a way that sacrifices their ability to make choices and to do things that they feel are valuable and positive in the world. Right? I remember I actually worked as an admin assistant in a law firm many years ago. And I remember seeing there was this one attorney he looked maybe 15 years older than he actually was. And his job was basically pushing papers for credit card companies to basically bully people who were credit card holders and owed some money, right? And so his job was just to bully people. He just pushed papers, sent out these threatening letters, and this guy looked terrible. He was limping around all the time. His whole body was just torqued and twisted, and he would just move around like a zombie through the day. And, at that time, he was charging probably $400 or $500 an hour to the credit card companies. So he's making good money. He's doing this day in, day out. But is he making a positive impact on the world? Does he feel good about himself? He looked miserable. I can't know his internal state really, but he looked darn miserable. So if he were building towards a reality where he's able to make money, make enough money that he can make choices that are in line with his values, that's a very big difference from, well, I have built this life where I need a certain amount of income to just survive, and as a result, I have to do whatever somebody else tells me I have to do, even if I don't agree with it. Okay, so if you are looking at how you're going to structure your life, how you want to structure your business, I think it makes the most sense to say, how do I maximize freedom while also making sure I have enough income, enough net worth to continue to have that freedom in the long run. So this is one thing I've noticed with the whole influencer community, and that's this whole thing of like, well, I just want to build a whole lot of followers so then I can promote stuff. And it might work for some people, that's fine. The thing is, once you are promoting stuff, once you are dependent on the income from companies that want to pay you to flog their stuff, you are now compromised. You're now compromised because now you want to make sure your content aligns with what these other companies want you to say. And this happens on a large level. You look around, you see how news media works. You see, it's like 75 or 80% of all TV ad spend is from pharmaceutical companies. And then you wonder, well, I wonder why news media doesn't have any critical stories about pharmaceutical companies. I cannot possibly figure out why they don't have any critical stories on pharmaceuticals, right? So when you are a lower level influencer and you're like, oh, I'm gonna, build my following and then I'm gonna sell stuff to them, you are basically making a short-term play, right? You're deciding, I'm gonna sacrifice my real beliefs and I'm gonna just say, hey, get this thing, right? Like whatever advertisers pay me, I'm gonna screen them a little bit and make sure we generally agree, but then ultimately, like I need to make sure my message aligns with them and theirs with mine, and then at some point, the fact that I need their money is going to lead to some friction. So, you want to maximize freedom, not just dollars, and let's talk about freedom now. So when I say freedom, we're not talking about absolving you from all responsibility. So people might think, oh yeah, I want to maximize freedom so I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't have anybody that I'm responsible for. I'm never going to have kids. I'm never going to have a family. I'm never going to whatever. I have no entanglements with other people. That sounds fine in theory, right? To be so wealthy and free that you are on your own, just traveling the world, eating the food that you want all the time, etc., right? It sounds great. You can also be free of entanglements if you want. You could do that very quickly and easily and cheaply, but just going out into the woods and camping forever, right? That's an easy way to do it. Or go off-grid, right? It's not that easy, but you can go off-grid, go get yourself an Airstream or a Sprinter van and go live by yourself. That's totally doable. Is that gonna fit for everybody? Probably not. I think I tend to be rather misanthropic. I don't generally like being around a lot of people all the time. That doesn't mean that being alone is the best thing. I actually have a wife, I have a kid. I really enjoy having them, being with them, and having the responsibility that it entails. And I think this big misconception exists where people think, well, if I have no responsibilities, I'm going to be happier. And I don't think that is true. I think having responsibilities, having projects, having things to do actually keeps you more grounded and keeps your brain and your body healthy. Somebody who's just sitting relaxed all day watching TV just to numb their mind, I would argue is not actually happier, is not actually content, is not balanced, and in fact can't be, because the things that they're consuming on TV or on social media or whatever are designed to make them unhappy and discontent, unsatisfied, and desiring of more crap, which is maybe a topic for another day. So when you're trying to maximize your freedom, what I'm saying is you're trying to maximize your ability to act in line with your values, and that includes meeting all the demands of the responsibilities that you are choosing for yourself or that may exist for you. Because sometimes our responsibilities are, I guess you choose them, right? I'm thinking about parental stuff, as your parents age, do you want to be able to help your parents? Can you help your parents? Do you have the time? Can you make the choice? Do you have the money? Can you do these things to help your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, your own children, right? Your spouse. Those are responsibilities that if you can meet those demands, you feel good about yourself. To help people in your community, it helps you feel better, it helps your community feel better. So freedom doesn't just mean like, oh, I'm separate from everything and I have nothing to do with anybody, I've got so much money, I can just whatever, go do whatever. That is, it's kind of like a solipsistic craziness, right? It's just like, I have nothing that moors me to anything, I'm not contributing anything. That's not going to make you happier. You know, you even think about older adults, like when my mom was, you know, in the stages of dying, you know, you could see how helpful it was for her to feel like she was doing something that was contributing to the family. Even though, you know, mentally and physically she wasn't that capable, it was really clear if she got to help and do something, just her whole mood would be better. Like she's focused, maybe she wants to try to cook something. It would make a big difference. And even a kid, like my 6-year-old, like when he has the opportunity to do something on his own that he feels contributes to the group, he feels really good. You can see how excited he is to be able to do that, to help. And you know, you see that in the beginning of life, you see that even at the end of life. There's no reason to believe that in the whole middle, that just sitting around playing video games and not contributing to others is going to make you content and happy. We're hardwired, I believe, to have a sense of duty and responsibility and to want to fulfill that in a healthy way without feeling like you're a slave, right? So, to wrap up, you want to maximize freedom to choose, to act in alignment with your values. You don't want to be overly focused on money. And to make this point even more clear, even if you decide, you know what, this is all BS, I'm just going to try to maximize the amount of dollars in my bank account, just remember, you will always lose if you're comparing how much money you have to others. Because guaranteed, somebody else out there has more money than you. Unless you're, I don't even know, some prince in Saudi Arabia, or you're the next Jeff Bezos. Unless you are willing to make massive sacrifices to become the absolute richest person on earth, you will always lose the comparison game. But you can absolutely win, very easily win on the freedom game and the wholesome, content life game if you maximize your freedom and don't get caught up spinning your wheels trying to get another $1, $10, $15, $20, $100,000. Because ultimately, is it going to make you happy that you got that money? Probably not if you had to burn every other bridge to get it. So let me know your thoughts. What do you think? Does this seem like a reasonable approach to life? How have you been approaching money and freedom? Drop me a comment down below. If you liked this, subscribe, and remember to keep it simple.